as a person of African descent. So before I speak tonight in the name of Bon Dieu, the God of my ancestors, who we believe descended from the heavens to help us gain our independence against white supremacy and slavery.
Jesus, man.
I speak in the name of Jean-Jacques Dessalines, the father of my country.
Yeah.
I speak tonight in the name of the ancestors who fought for our freedom and independence. I speak in the name of my grandparents, Saïd and Mocombe, who taught me the ways of our ancestors. All right. My area of expertise, I was trained as a philosopher and a sociologist. My training is as a phenomenologist and a structural Marxist. Part of my doctoral work and all of my publications are tying in my philosophy to the freedom and liberty of black people, wherever you are. I consider myself what's called a Pan-Africanist Marxist. So everything I do, all of my research, all of my writing focuses on people of African descent, our history, our philosophy, our sociology, everything that impacts people of African descent. My doctoral, again, I was trained as a structural Marxist and a phenomenologist. So that's important. I say that because to understand any social problem in society, you have to be able to frame the social problem. You have to understand its origins, where it came from, etc. And I always begin with the capitalist social structure. Why? We live in a capitalist world system. Since the 16th century, capitalism has been the modus operandi of the society, of the world. It's capitalism that rules the world. Let me put it in a short way. It's money that rules the world, that governs the world. In academia, we say it's capitalism. Well, what happens in capitalism? Our action, what we do in the world, comes from four sources. What the philosopher Immanuel Kant calls the subject of experience. What does that mean? Our body drives us to do certain things. When you're hungry, your body tells you you're hungry. When you have to go to the bathroom, your body tells you it has to go to the bathroom. That's the first source of what we call agency, what we do in the world. Our bodies dictate that. You also have what's called, in physics, subatomic particles. We're driven unconsciously by unconscious drives. The psychologist Freud attribute those unconscious drives to sexuality, libido. He makes the distinction between eros and thanatos, love and hate, were those unconscious drives. So it is our relationship with our mothers that either makes us hateful people or loving people. Well, we know Freud, that was all foolishness. So contemporarily, and I'm also trained as a physicist, so as a physicist, we attribute that to what we call subatomic particles, meaning we're not only material things, but the material things that constitute us are what's called subatomic particles. They're neither destroyed or created, they get recycled. So we don't know what causes our unconscious drives. We're not even aware of our unconscious drive. That's the second source of what makes us do what we do. The third source that makes us do what we do is called the deferment of meaning and ego-centered communicative discourse. All that means is, let's say I say blue, you say red. You view something differently from the way I perceive it. That's called the deferment of meaning in ego-centered communicative discourse. And the fourth thing is called structural differentiation. Now, what does that mean? That means capitalist society divides us into rich people and poor people. That we, as black people, it's not because we were black that we were enslaved. No, we were cheap labor. We started off as cheap labor. Racial slavery came about to justify the class system. So all over the islands you had, whether you're in Jamaica, Barbados, we're at Haiti, you had two classes that emerged. In America, two classes emerged. E. Franklin Frazier calls it the black bourgeoisie and the black underclass. Malcolm X said house niggas and field niggas. That's a result of structural differentiation. Capitalism divides us into two classes. Now, how does capitalism do that, you might add? Now, this is the shocker. It does it, initially, it did it through the church. Well, before that, well, yes, it did it through the church. We had the pastors, priests who were of one class, and then everybody else. Contemporarily, well, in agricultural slavery, it did it by separating between field slaves and house slaves. Can anybody guess how capitalism since let's say the 18th century differentiates us into poor and rich? I'm going to shock you. It's through education. If you're from the islands, your family during agricultural slavery, during the Industrial Revolution, they stressed what? Education. When you get an education, what's your aim? Work to do what? To get money. To get money and to have a middle-class lifestyle.
Right.
So education is in place not to somehow make us equal. It's supposed to differentiate us. Those who don't get education, what happens? They fall by the wayside. Well, my research, working on my doctorate, was focusing on the issue, why do black boys and blacks in general underachieve vis-a-vis whites and other groups? They disproportionately underachieve vis-a-vis other groups. This is an issue in America, especially, that's been a major problem since the 1940s when blacks, and this is when they were trying to integrate the Army, they realized blacks didn't score well on standardized tests. What's the issue? Well, initially it was because they were inferior. That was the issue. Well, the problem is in contemporary, what I argue, and most of my work is in contemporary society, education differentiates blacks. Black boys don't place an emphasis on education. Why? Because the main purpose of education is to achieve a bourgeois lifestyle. But what are the dominant images of black boys in our society? Rappers and athletes. ESPN did a study in 2000. They took 2,000 students, divided between black boys, whites, Asians, and they asked them all, what did you want to be when you grow up? The black boy, the whites, some said engineers, doctors, lawyers. Some said athletes, they wanted to be baseball players. Asians, same thing. Every single black boy they asked what they wanted to be, they said one of two things: rappers or athletes. When they don't achieve the bourgeois lifestyle through education, they have other opportunities. They go through rapping and athletics. And many now, they don't even focus on education. From high school, they're dropping out to be rap. Remember, Jay-Z didn't graduate. LeBron didn't go to college. LeBron is worth almost $1 billion. So why should they place an emphasis on education? And the problem is, we have to, and this is how I'm framing the problem, because we will become the new majority pretty soon. But we will become a dumb majority with no earth to live on. The problem is capitalism doesn't take into account that as everyone esteemed to live a bourgeois lifestyle, Marx didn't take into account the environment. The earth cannot sustain a bourgeois lifestyle. We know that from the islands. We know that if you grow up in Africa or any third world, we know that. So for me, number one, we have to change the nature of the education system. Because the education system, as Louis Althusser said, is an ideological apparatus to reproduce the capitalist social system. But the earth and the environment cannot sustain the capitalist social structure. And we're not teaching enough young people to resolve the issues that we will be facing within the next 20 years. Not 100, not 50, the next 20 years. So whereas we're focused on getting an education to get a good job so I could drive an SUV, young black boys, young minorities, they're focusing on how do I get the SUV without having to go to education. But if all of us drive an SUV, we don't have a place to drive it on. So what we need to start focusing on is, what is the basis of our education? Why are we telling our young people they have to get an education if we're telling them to get an education? I have 2 boys. I tell my sons, education should be for 4 purposes. Medicine, philosophy, of course I have to put in philosophy, engineering, and law. Everything else doesn't matter. Why should I get an MBA? To rob people of their money? Nothing else matters. Nothing else should matter in a society that's concerned about the environment and the future of our next generation. Nothing else should matter. But we're not. We're concerned with bourgeois lifestyle and telling our children to get a bourgeois education. And when young black boys refuse to get a bourgeois education, because the same in bourgeois lifestyle you want them to have, they can get it by not getting an education.
That's right.
LeBron didn't get an education, which is so paradoxical because he has a commercial that says stay in school. That's very ironic and paradoxical. It's so hypocritical. But anyway, we're not Purdue. Look at Lil Wayne. Lil Wayne didn't graduate high school. He makes more money than the president who went to Harvard. So we're running into 2 paradoxes. On the one hand, our young people do not want an education. You can't tell them the way to achieve, because as parents, we want them to have a nice home, nice car, raise children, blah, 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 as our parents taught us. But for them, there's other ways to do that. So now, what's the purpose of education? The purpose of education is to resolve the problems that we have set about in trying to achieve the bourgeois lifestyle. But we have to change that. And in changing that, we have to change our society. And for people of minorities who are about to be the majority, we have a heavy problem that we have to resolve. How do we fix the world in order to live in it in the future and for future generations? Now, if you go to say education, our children don't equate education with that issue. They equate education, as our parents did, as a form of embourgeoisement, to become bourgeois. We have to start to reconfigure the way we think about education, the way we think about our young people, and the way we think about our future. Because you all are looking to be the majority, but we won't have a world to look forward to. So we have to start to reconfigure our education. So when we tell our young people, hey, get an education, it's not why. It's not, oh, so you can get a job and work hard. No, so we can fix the problems that will allow future generations to have an earth and environment to live on. And now all of this is being done at the expense of the poor in the third world, whether it's in Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, everything. We are fracking. We are destroying the environment. We are doing all of this. And the minority that's going to be the majority aren't educating people to deal with the problems that they will be facing in the next 20 years. Why? Because we're concerned with bourgeoisement, bourgeois living, and bling bling. So we have to change our education system, we have to change our society first, change the nature of our education system, and then educate the minority that will be the majority on how to resolve. In fact, better yet, we have to go back to, they used to call us primitive. Well, we have to go back to primitive times. Wow. Because in the future, there is no earth. Now, I would try to say all of this in Creole for those who don't understand me. Non, éducation, c'est